The engineering world is going crazy for Claude Code right now, but what's so special about it? Welcome to Claude Code 101, the first video in a series of videos helping you understand a little bit better how to use Claude Code in your workflow. There's this slash set of commands. You can drop screenshots in. Let's try to open it up in Cursor itself. It is a team of agents that you hire to do work. Claude Code, Claude Code, Claude Code. Today you'll learn how to quickly get started with Claude Code and see some of its key features, things like slash commands, integrating with IDEs like Cursor itself. We'll explore its planning mode, one of its secret features that people have really started to enjoy, understand its pricing and really in the end, its value. And really, I'll share with you why I keep reaching for this tool. It's actually quite useful. And for some reason, I just keep going back. And by the way, at the very end of this video, I'm going to share a super secret surprise that just released, and it has nothing to do with Claude Code, but it may be your answer if you don't want to pay for Claude Code. Stay tuned for that. Okay, if you come out to the website and check out Claude Code, you'll see a very simple install command, npm install-g, Anthropic-ai Claude Code. That will get you started. That'll install it into your environment. And then all you'll need to do is type in Claude to launch the application. And so now we're in a shell application or terminal application. This is Claude Code running. The first time you run it, it may ask you to log in with your Anthropic account or ask for an API key. You've seen me maybe on this channel code with Cursor quite a bit and some other tools. And this is just another one of those IDEs, if you will, basically a place where you would work on a project, do some kind of coding effort. First, let's kind of explore this a little bit. If I dropped into Claude Code in a new project, I might ask what this project is all about. Yep, I will type in the right field. And of course, like any other IDE, it's going to go and look through the files, read a couple things, and you'll see it working here, working through its token list. And so now it kind of read through some of the files, tells us more about this application. And we'll show this application in just a second because we'll go through a bug fix to see what it's like to make a change here in Claude Code to better understand what the working flow kind of looks like here. But this is just a good way to say, orient me in this project. Claude has a special way of dealing with actions or kind of their methodology for your menus or actions that you might tape. So instead of having to memorize all the commands you might type in, there's this slash set of commands. So any command that starts with slash, you'll see in a list that will show up down here below that I'm just moving through at this point to highlight them. And one of them that actually is very worth when you walk into a project the first time doing is go in and do init. So the init one is kind of look around in this project and build a file called ClaudeMD. They have this concept that you can use a hash command here, and you'll see it says add to memory. When you're adding to memory, it's adding to this ClaudeMD file. And that's actually pretty useful. Every time you start a new chat, this ClaudeMD file will precede in that chat. So it's like the first prompt in the chat. You won't see it, but it's the information that any new chat, this will get seeded inside of it. And thus any other conversation within that chat will have reference to that information in the context window. Okay, and so now it has finished, and I'm going to scroll around here a little bit so that you can see we're looking at what is essentially a diff file, which means a difference. So this is the set of changes, but we can't edit them here. Unlike something like Cursor or Windsurf or even VSC with GitHub Copilot attached to it, we can't say this edit I do want, or this line I don't want, or this file is okay and that one's not, or accept all of them. Those aren't processes that we have here in Claude Code. That's not what it's about. Claude Code is about you giving a set of requirements to a system that system then can go make those changes, working with you some, far less than something like a directly iterative practice that you would see in something like Cursor. So when we use Cursor, the intention is to be at code level. They want you to be at file level, verifying the changes that it's making. So let me go forward and describe something here that we're seeing. It is asking me, do I want to make a change or do I not want to make a change? But it's also saying, yes, make this change. Ask Claude to not ask me this question again. Basically, move on. And what it's telling me is Shift Tab. Now, Shift Tab is an interesting feature here. So let me hit Shift Tab here for a second, and you'll see down below that there is a few modes that it's moving through. Standard mode, which is what we've been in. It will ask questions very frequently. Do you want me to take this step? Do you want me to take this step? You can do auto accept, which is it will do its best to just go through and make, any file change it accepts, any file change it accepts. And then it will start asking that further question of, do you want me to do this and not remind you again for this particular kind of action? So you'll still be asked questions like, oh, I'm about to do an ls or list the files within your directory. Am I okay to do that? And so many times at the beginning of a session, you'll have to kind of say, yeah, keep doing this or keep doing this. And then there's this plan mode, and we will talk about plan mode. In any case, let's go back to auto accept for a second, because what I want to show you is an application that I've been building, and I really have a bug in it, a couple bugs that I kind of want to work on. So let's pull that application up and I'll show you very briefly the bugs that I want to ask for and see what Claude can do to them. This is an application that I wrote that is kind of showing me OBS is the editing software, the video capture software that I'm using to record with. And this is how long I've been recording for, total record time and current record time. And it's just kind of counting up depending upon how long I've been recording. There's other modes in here though, and one of them I'm not happy with. So this is the time mode, and time mode here has a 0 when I'm in AM/PM mode, but also has a 0 when I'm in 24-hour mode. Now in 24-hour mode, this makes sense, and it might make sense to not have the colons. I'll leave that for a later moment. But in AM/PM, I prefer to not have a 0 pad on the front of my hour. I know that's trivial, but I kind of want to look at that and then ask it to make that change. So the first thing I'll do is I'll grab a screenshot here. And then I have a screenshot utility that pulls it up here that I can drag. So this is as if you're dragging a file from somewhere in your file system and dropping it in. So the first thing with Claude Code is you can drop screenshots in, and it helps quite a bit. I do this very frequently to kind of orient the model when I'm working with it so that it understands visual things and I don't have to try to describe pixel to pixel what I'm talking about. The other way to do this, because there's another bug, is let's set this timer here for 5 seconds. All right, so we have a countdown timer. So I have another mode in here that if you're doing a presentation, you can say I have 10 minutes for the presentation. I'll set my timer. And when I want it to start, I just click on it and let it count down. And that way it can stay in my field of view while I'm doing a presentation or something like that. Awesome. However, you'll notice once we go into the negative that it doesn't lay out quite as well as it should, and this should go red. So the intention is for this to be red in this mode, but also I really don't like that it's pushed the button off the side. So those are the two things that we're going to ask it to fix. I'm going to take another screenshot of this. And this time, my screenshot utility also puts things on my clipboard, so I'll dismiss that. And I'll come back and say, you can also paste things in here instead of dragging in files, but it's not your normal Command V. I don't know what it's going to be in Windows, but in Mac, it's Control V. So Control is very commonly used in terminal applications. So Control V here will drop the second image in. All right, so with that, we will hit stop on this guy and then come back to clock mode so that we can watch the 0. And then I'm going to tell him,
in image 1, you can see clock mode in this application. In clock mode, the AM/PM mode seems to be 0 padded in front of the hour. I don't want it to be 0 padded only when in AM/PM mode. I think we can remove that. The second image is a countdown timer, and that countdown mode, when it goes into the negative, I think the color for the mode itself or the clock itself should be red to alert me that we're in trouble. But also you can see that it kind of blows it off screen. I think we need to maybe change the size of the font at the moment it goes into the negative in that case, just a little bit, adjust it downward just a touch. So if you don't mind taking care of those two things, and tell me kind of what you think it's going to take to do that.
All right, so it's going to go through, obviously, read the files. I'll come back once it kind of has its idea that it wants to work. All right, in its thinking, it's saying, great, I have a clear understanding of everything. This is what I might need to do. And it's come back and said, these are the two issues. These are the steps I need to take. It's going to start looking through the files to make the changes that it needs to make and looking for all the locations that it needs to do these things. Every now and then you need to tell it, yes, go forward with this grep command. So this is the example for grep commands. It's now asking, even though we're in the mode that says accept everything, other commands, it'll say, can I do certain commands? So I'll say, yep, don't ask me again for grep. And now it's starting to look through the files. Okay, so it's saying, great, now I understand both issues. Here, let me make the first fix. We saw that diff before. This is it moving through that first fix here. It's changing the pad 2 with a 0. We see that it made the change here. If I go to 24 hours, it's still back at 24 hours fine. So that worked perfectly. And it's saying it's also changing the style to reduce font size when it goes into the negative. So that's great news. So let's take a look at our timer. That looks pretty good when we go into the negative. If I reset to 5 seconds and I run it again, yep, that looks great. So perfect. That's kind of round tripping how you might make changes here in Claude Code, but it's still a little bit frustrating to me. I'm an engineer, so maybe it's just because I'm an engineer. Maybe other people will absolutely love feeling like this. I kind of feel disconnected from some some of the changes that are occurring. And I will very often open Cursor. So for a long time, I've used Claude Code like this, a long time in internet days, AI internet days, but I've opened Claude Code and worked for some problems in this kind of mode that we're seeing here. And I also have Cursor open in another window, but they have a fix for that. Maybe they have for a long time. Claude Code is just a CLI program, which just basically means it runs in any terminal surface. So let's try to open it up in Cursor itself. Okay, so here we are in Cursor as we're used to seeing Cursor, and just do Claude like we were seeing before. And Claude will run in this terminal environment here. So essentially we now have Claude running inside of Cursor. And the value to this is we can now look at the files that we want to look at and understand what's being written, what's being changed more easily. You can even see in a full IDE, you can start understanding some of the changes that are being made. These bars here will allow you to see what was the difference. But there's something really special here. If you remember, we have these slash commands. One of the slash commands is IDE. So if I select this IDE, you'll see it comes up and says, we've determined that you're using the Cursor environment. Everything that you're gaining context to in Cursor itself is also essentially connected to the terminal system down here in this version of Claude. So Claude is aware if I select these lines, Claude already has context to those lines, so I can just start asking about them here. It's a really useful pattern to me to be able to still feel like I can touch the files, as well as just use Claude as kind of that disconnected editor to some degree. And I do want to talk about that disconnected editor. So the concept that we have for Claude is that it is a team of agents that you hire to do work. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't have questions for you. As you saw, we have to answer questions from time to time. And every now and then you'll have to direct them and say, well, wait a second, it looks like the change you're making, how about if we also do this? Or looks like we need to do a different direction. Getting a better plan keeps you from having to make those adjustments nearly as frequently. And we'll look at that in just 1 second here, but you still do need to talk with it some. This is not removing engineers from the engineering step, but it is really allowing you to say, if you can put a good collection of rules around the change that you want, Claude Code is there to solve that part of the puzzle. It's great at just setting it, letting it work on the plan, and it will come back at the end of its work and tell you, hey, I'm done with that. You can take a look at it. So that's something that I think is very different from Cursor. I have to babysit Cursor, and believe me, I love Cursor. So I use it all the time and do appreciate that I'm a little bit more connected to the changes, a little bit more in concert with where things are going rather than fire and forget and hope that when I come back, it's kind of in the right shape. But there are a lot of things that I do that I need to say, oh, I need to completely convert this from A to B. Or if you could refactor all this into another thing, write some tests and verify that it's going to work when I'm done. That is something I would love to let a whole team of agents go off and do things. Claude Code has this ability to run subtasks, so it basically can run itself as its own task. So it can take a portion of the work and say, oh, this portion I'll run in one Claude Code instance, and this portion of the work I'll run in another. And what that really does for you is asynchronicity, which means they can run at the same time. And then all of a sudden you're parallelizing a lot of the work instead of I'm going to do step 1 and I'm going to do step 2. All right, so now let's look at planning mode real quickly. So if we looked in here and said, oh, in fact, some people like the terminal window at the bottom and some people don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape this terminal window at the bottom and show you a couple tricks here. Once you open a file, you have the ability to run Claude Code in another tab. It's just one of their integration elements. If you do that, it basically will open another tab. It'll be like any other document tab. You can drag around and separate different ways, any way you want to use it. But this is a terminal tab, so it's running terminal inside of it, what we were just seeing. So I can ask a question like, hey, I don't want the colon in 24-hour mode. Can you tell me how you might pull this off? Hit Shift Tab and get us to this plan mode. This is a tiny change that does not need a plan. It's probably a one-line change. You're almost always going to be better off if you have an active plan that you're coding against rather than just firing it and hoping, here's what I'm asking for, good luck, go do it. If it's something this simple, it'll almost certainly get it right. If it's got 2 or 3 concerns like we had last time, you run a risk that it gets confused of those concerns together if it didn't write a plan first. This ends up being the plan that Claude came back with. So it's saying, are you ready to code? Here's Claude's plan. Remove colons from 24-hour time display. Current implementation looks like this, and these lines. Change required would be this line. It's going to change this to this. The result will be blah, blah, blah. and the one file that's modified. And so you can either say, no, keep planning, and that means you can keep having that conversation and adjusting what this looks like, or you can just say, yes, go ahead and do it. But it allows you to be in the driver's seat for the change that's going to happen. Now, I kind of hate what this looks like, so I think I will undo this. But of course, that's not something that's really easy to do with Claude. So if I opened up clock mode here and went and found the line that they changed, I can then, because I'm in Cursor as an IDE, I can use its tools to revert that change and hit save, and we get our colon back. The last thing that's really important for us to talk about is the value. So Claude Code has recently really hit the vibes, mostly because Anthropic did a really, really smart thing, and that was include using Claude Code in your subscription. If you're a subscriber to Anthropic, by the way, let me say this very clearly, call to action. If you subscribe to Anthropic today and you have any interest in Claude Code or anything like it, go get it. It's free to use. You can use it against your current subscription. You will get a certain amount of usage. It rolls over. It kind of resets every 5 hours. So they give you enough, I will say, generally enough usage to be able to mess with it and use it. I use it very frequently. I am only a pro subscriber, which means $20 a month, and I can get real value out of it. But admittedly, I use Cursor quite a bit. So they're in concert with one another. So I'm not using it exclusively. And I also will say, when you use it in this mode, you will not have access to their strongest Opus model. So the Opus model is only available in the 5x and 10x max modes, but using Claude Code, the reason that it becomes such a big deal is it's essentially free to people that are already subscribed. That really very often will push people into the $100 plan because it starts to run out. You can start to see one thing that's really valuable is Claude Code intentionally is opening up the context window. Okay, so I said I was going to share a trick with you, like super secret, just released. Maybe nobody else has talked about this. People have talked about this, but I'm going to pretend nobody else has talked about this. And I find it very exciting. I have almost nothing to report on this, but thanks for sticking around to this point, and I will show you something that I find very, very exciting. All right, so let's drop back down into Terminal real quick, and we are in the same project, and I'm going to open up Gemini. Hey, so interestingly, Google just released Gemini CLI, so you might think Claude Code. Very, very similar. I don't know all of what it can do, but it absolutely can make changes. It can absolutely work on your project in very similar ways. In fact, once this finishes and comes back and tells us about this project, I'll show you that it even has a very similar set of slash commands that you can go in, do things like that. So there's really a lot that looks very interesting here, but the most interesting thing is it's not quite free, but it's really, really close to free. So I would say go look for the Gemini CLI because I think it's the next thing. It's running off the 2.5 Pro model, which is previous to Claude Code coming out and being such a big deal. That has been my major coding model for a while, and it is a great coding model. Like they're saying you can do 60 calls per minute free. I don't know enough about it to do any report, so I think you'd be able to use it essentially all day long with 2.5 Pro in similar ways, even if it's not exactly the same way as Claude Code. So I think it's really, really worth diving into Gemini CLI as well, just to take a look. So if you've been wondering if what I've been talking about with Claude Code is good and you want to pay another $20, I would say, well, first go check this out. But Claude Code, I have to say still, until I really vet this thing, Claude Code is definitely a yes. Okay, so that's kind of the fly through. My general takeaway of why on earth would I have Cursor and Claude Code, and really should you have both? My takeaway is something like this. If you're a Cursor user and you're happy with Cursor, but you'd either like another agent to be able to go do things while you're doing other things in Cursor, then maybe yes, just maybe. But if you are starting to find yourself wandering into chunks of work that you wish you could walk away from and let them get done until you come back, then you definitely need to look into something like Claude Code or the Gemini CLI, like I mentioned. But really, it becomes that extra layer. The way to imagine it is one is a pair programmer that you sit next to and you work through a problem with. The other one is a team that you've kind of enlisted to help you work through a problem. So you'll be a guide to them and set a plan forward with them and go back and forth with a couple approvals. But beyond that, you want them to do all the work, and then you will vet the information at the end of that. And that's really the difference. And really, one is many times I have Claude Code run off and it does an hour plus of work churning through stuff that I don't have to look at and I come back later and go, okay, where did we get to? Where are we in the plan? So it's very, very good at that kind of not quite entirely background task. That's the difference. I do have both. I subscribe to Anthropic already, so Claude Code for me is kind of a no-brainer. If you don't subscribe, do you need both? I would say no. No. The moment you feel like you need both, you'll know. And it does have a real value. There's a real value add to these things. But at the same time, it's a lot of money to put down unless you're doing a fair bit of code. Once you do a fair bit of code, 20 bucks a month is not that big of a deal. So I would say give it a shot. It's 20 bucks. Give it a shot once. See if you can throw a lot at it. Try Google Gemini CLI. I think that might be a first step, at least, into this space. I think this space is about to explode. I hope you learned something on this one, but the next video will go into a little bit deeper, a little bit better tips, like you can add your own / commands and how to plan better with it or how to get checklists built out with it. Those kinds of things are the step that I would go into next to say, how do you become more and more successful with these kinds of tools? So look out for that. Subscribe if you want to see that next video. Thanks for coming along on this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Today you'll learn how to quickly get started with Today you'll see how to, how to quickly get started with Claude Code. Okay. Okay, I'm ready. Damn it.